Hey, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and welcome to Thriving in Uncertainty, the show where we dive into the strategies, we discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to well thrive in an uncertain marketplace. Now, today, my guest is none other than the Ian Altman. Boy, I've told so many people today that I was going to spend a little bit of time with Ian, and swear, Ian, everybody knows you. So I know you as a strategic advisor, a B2B keynote speaker, but tell everybody, our listeners, a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all that great stuff.
Well, Meredith, for starters, I'm glad that you reached out to my wife so you could get someone who said they knew who I was. So that was very nice of you, very generous, and thanks for having me here. So my background, I started my first business in 1993. Wow. And we quickly became a Fast 50 company, one of the 50 fastest growing companies in the Washington, D.C. region. By 98, we then started a software company, and I sold both companies in 2005 to a group of investment bankers out of New York. I served as managing director of that parent company and grew the parent company from a value of $100 million to $2 billion in a little over 3 years. And during that time, I was traveling about 200,000 miles a year, wasn't spending time with my family, and after a while thought, why am I still doing this? And so I went to the board and said, I'm done. Not like I'm going to be done in 6 months, like, hey, at the end of this month, I'm going to be done. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I had no idea. I was fortunately in a position where I didn't have to worry about what I would do. And some friends said, why don't you help other people on how they grow their businesses? And I didn't even know there was such a profession. And so, the better part of 12 years ago, I started this business. And now I'm probably best known for the book that I co-authored with Jack Quarles called Same Side Selling. And I get to travel the world and help people figure out how to not be commoditized and shift the focus from price to value and earn attention, all those things that help grow my businesses.
So you are probably a pro at uncertainty. And I always like to start this show by asking my guests, when I say the word uncertainty, what comes up for you? And I want to add a caveat to that, is that what are some of the issues around uncertainty that you're seeing in the marketplace?
Well, I think sometimes people confuse uncertainty with a lack of control, meaning, well, it's uncertain, so it's out of my control. And the reality is that uncertainty means just that. We're not certain of what's going to happen. So in any sales situation, there is uncertainty. And the question about uncertainty is, are you uncertain about whether or not you can deliver? Or are you uncertain about whether or not you're a good fit for that client? Those are different things that play into people's heads. And I think too often people in sales see that uncertainty as, well, is our business going to survive? Am I going to be able to make sales? Instead of really thinking about the uncertainty of our current situation and what we can do about it.
Well, so one of the things with uncertainty, I thought this was really interesting. This morning I saw a poll around it, and they were asking people just two questions. Are you somebody who runs to the sound of the gunfire, or are you somebody who likes to pause, wait, gather information, and then maybe later decide what to do? And I took the poll just so I could get the results. And I was kind of shocked that it was only like 20% of the people said they were people who ran to the sound of the gunfire and took action. And 70%, of the people said, we like to wait and take information. Do you have a feeling either way on that? Does it matter? And who are you seeing succeed in today's marketplace?
Well, I think there are crazy people like you and me who fall into that 20% category where we go into that. So, for example, when all of these things started happening in the world of coronavirus, all this, quote, uncertainty, what I would counsel my clients, which I'm sure is the same thing you counseled your clients, is, so where are the opportunities now? So, for example, for people in the wealth advisory space, for the longest time, people were just seeing continuous growth of their portfolios, so they weren't open to talking to somebody new. So even though this situation has disrupted a lot of people and created uncertainty, that uncertainty creates opportunities for certain marketplaces. Now, if you were somebody who had a hotel, that's a different story. But now it's a matter of, okay, how do you deal with the uncertainty guests might have? Because whoever makes them feel the most comfortable is going to get the disproportionate amount of that business compared to other people. So I think in every situation, it comes down to how do you look at the situation you're in, see what could be coming down the road, and anticipate and pivot to that, rather than just sitting in a corner and saying, woe is me, this has happened. Don't feel like a victim. Always feel like, how can you take hold of this and actually make a difference?
Yeah, I think that is, I know that some of our viewers have some questions here, so I just have a couple of more because you're really giving me great information to go with that I want to talk a little bit deeper. Being that you are in sales, I feel like, I know that I have had the experience that sales has been one of the hardest areas hit with this, just because I don't know what it is about us as salespeople, but we just we've been successful doing it how we've always done it. And even though technology's been out there for a long time, most of us still go to a networking event. We still take our clients to lunch. We still throw the cocktail party or go to the trade show. What are some of the changes that you have seen in business growth, and in how have you been helping your clients kind of adapt to what's going on right now?
Well, not surprisingly, you hit on the very topics that I've been hearing the most often from people, which is, well, we used to build our pipeline from going to networking events or conferences or hosting events. Now what do we do?
Right.
And so their big challenge is, how do we change that? Because here's the interesting thing. It used to be the way people attracted clients was largely around some sort of event. So it was either the conference was the reason people came there, and now if they were there, you could interact with them. I'm going to host a seminar or a dinner at a great place, and that's how I get to interact with them. And now we have to learn new ways of earning attention that are actually based on the value we deliver to them, not some secondary thing that we're piggybacking on top of. And so that's the biggest change that I see, is people learning how to effectively attract those clients and attract interest from people in an authentic way, when they used to use some sort of tactic or some other event that was the catalyst to get in the same room with those people.
So what advice are you giving to your clients? I do, because I love what we're talking about, because one of the things about salespeople is a lot of them, I mean, we're charming, we're entertaining. So if we go to networking events or something, it's not hard for us to go up and engage with people and introduce people. And we have spent years developing those skills. Now all of a sudden we're behind a screen, people are completely zoomed out, and it's hard to get in front of people. So what are some of the things that you're advising to basically begin to make that transition?
A lot of it comes down to some simple concepts, and that is that when you go to those networking events and you quickly build rapport, what you've done is now people are open to the idea of talking to you and to connecting with you. And what most high-performing professionals do after that is they start talking about, here are the kinds of things that we solve for other people like you. Do you know one or two other people who might have those needs? And oftentimes the person will say, yeah, I do. The interesting thing is that the people who are not top performers, if I ask them, what are the problems that you solve? What are the symptoms that you treat, metaphorically? They oftentimes give a blank stare back, because they don't know. They know how to pitch their products and services. They don't necessarily know the symptoms someone would have that warrants that treatment. And so the advice I give people is to be acutely focused on what are those problems that you solve better than anybody else. And can you quickly describe the differentiation between what you do and what other people do in a way that helps people say, yes, I have that problem, and I understand that when I have that problem, I might be looking for help at one of three levels, and you operate at that top level. Now we're in a conversation where someone says, okay, yes, I have that problem, and I know why I should be talking to you. That all makes sense. As opposed to a networking event, it's like, oh, here's someone who went and got me a drink. Okay, I'll give them a little bit of time. Now we have to earn their attention in a different way. And oftentimes it's talking about the problems that we're solving, or the questions that we're hearing, or the trends that we're seeing that will pique someone's interest.
So one of our listeners, Sam here, just said, he said, I love that. He said, I obviously have work to do on getting more attuned to the problems that I solve. But he said, how do I even get a prospect's attention in the first place?
Okay. Well, in some cases, I mean, keep in mind, we have to have some way of reaching out. Now, whether it's LinkedIn, which is the biggest networking event on the planet, it's happening 24/7. Here's the thing. what do we most often see on LinkedIn? Somebody pitching us. And let's face it, if you were at a networking event and someone came up and said, let me tell you about how great I am, you would run the other direction. But on LinkedIn, people think it's okay. I know you and I have joked about this in the past, where how many inquiries do we get? How many people pitching us saying, I can help you grow your business. I can help you with sales. And we're thinking, did you look at the profile first? Because this may not be a good use of your time. But
right.
Still, it's just something that people don't get. So we need to make sure we don't come across as someone who's there just selling things. But if you started saying, here are some of the trends I'm seeing, I'm curious what people think about that. The idea of an effective networking interaction is establishing a conversation. It's not, when you walk into a live networking event, if we can remember back to when those things happened, they don't hand you a soapbox and a megaphone and say, here, you can hop up on this and then broadcast your message to everybody. No, what they do is they say, here's your name tag.
Yeah.
And your opportunity is to go have dialogues with people and genuinely connect with them. It's the same thing. So if we can articulate, here are the questions that we're hearing, here are the problems we're solving, it's very effective. For some of my clients, that comes down to short and concise videos and webinars, if you will, that say, here are the most common questions we're hearing, and you share those. If these are of interest to you, we're happy to talk to you and learn more. Mm-hmm. And so it's about saying, here's where we can help, not here's what we're selling.
Right. As Serena just tuned in, she said, best line ever is, here are some of the trends I'm seeing. She said she's definitely going to use that in some of her. So it's almost really about positioning yourself more as an authority and a resource first.
Absolutely. The way I look at it is there are three personas in the world of business growth or sales. There is the order taker, there's the stereotypical salesperson, and there's the subject matter expert. The order taker in most businesses is going to be replaced by Amazon because all the order taker can do is tell you how much is it and when can you get it. Mm-hmm. The salesperson thinks it's their job to sell whatever it is they have to sell, whether you need it or not. And the subject matter expert is the person someone would pay to speak with if that's what it took to tap into their expertise. And it doesn't matter which one you think you are. What you have to realize is that when you're the customer, who do you want to deal with? Mm-hmm. The salesperson or the subject matter expert? And when I speak with executives, they tell me, well, I want that subject matter expert. And we need to come across as a subject matter expert who understands some of these trends, some of the patterns, the big questions that we can help people answer. That's what's going to attract those people to us.
So what are three things that people need to do to become subject matter experts?
Well, I guess the first one would be have some level of expertise. Oftentimes what I say, so we'll use that one, but it really comes down to oftentimes you're not a subject matter expert because you're a great generalist. I mean, how many people do you know where you say, oh, this person is really a master of nothing, but they know a little bit about a whole bunch of things, you gotta talk to them. It doesn't happen. We refer people to experts who have specialization. So for starters, focus on narrow niches, if you will. So it could be that you say, I'm going to focus on a certain geography, or I'm going to focus on a certain industry or select industries. And then you start understanding their lingo. And all of a sudden, you become much more compelling because you understand what's going on in that industry or in that space. Mm-hmm. The second side is be a phenomenal listener to what's going on. So very often, you hear people start by saying something like, well, what keeps you up at night? And the problem with that is that you don't know what the answer is going to be. And they might say what keeps them up at night is not something that you can help with. Oh, my neighbor always drives in late at night and slams their car door. Well, you can't fix that. So now what do? It's not going to help you. So we want to make sure that of those three things, it's first establish some level of expertise in a vertical. The second one is be a great listener to hear what's going on in those spaces. And then you want to think about how would people articulate those problems in that industry? And then how do you position yourself as the go-to people to solve that? So for example, in the wealth management space, it might be somebody who specializes in people between 55 and 65 who are thinking about retiring but aren't sure what their future is going to be. And maybe it's people in the engineering field. Well, that sounds hyper-specific, but there are a lot of people in that segment of the marketplace. So then you might start creating content that says, so what are the top 5 questions that engineers who are contemplating retirement have? And someone who's an engineer says, oh, I want to watch that video. I want to read that piece of content because it's all about me, as opposed to, what should you do for retirement? Well, there's 1,000 articles like that, but there are very few that are specific for that niche.
So I think this is really great advice. I want to make sure everybody that's listening out there, because one of the biggest questions I am getting right now, and really talking to seasoned professionals, is truly, how do you prospect in today's environment? And it truly has become a challenge, because really all the methods that we have used and that have worked so successfully for us, they've gone by the wayside, and who really knows exactly when they'll come back and exactly what that's going to look like. So really, in essence, what we're talking about is you have to be more relevant than you have ever been. And one of the other challenges that I'm seeing, and I'd love to hear your comments on this, is that so many people that I interact with, whether you own a small business, you're traditionally in sales, or sales is just a piece of your job, you're still trying to sell and solve the problems that were there before this crisis, rather than the problems that are here now.
You know what? That's so well said, because anybody who thinks that, oh, we're just going to keep doing things the way we did 7 months ago, is kidding themselves.
Yeah.
And so we need to figure out different ways of attracting people, and we need to acknowledge that the people who were our ideal clients 7 months ago, and the problems we solved for people 7 months ago, are not the same today. So there are probably businesses or individuals out there who you can serve better today than you could have 7 months ago, as well as there are probably types of businesses or specific problems that are totally different today, that now you say, you know what, we're really skilled at addressing that. So the funny part is that the message, for example, that I share about really tapping into the wording and the messaging around the problems that you solve and how to differentiate yourself, are even more relevant today than they were 7 months ago. And so if you think about it, it used to be, oh, well, I have an advantage because I'm right near these people. I already have a relationship with them. Now, everyone's just a Zoom call away.
Yeah. So
it's much harder to differentiate yourself. It's much harder to stand out. And that's where you really have to hone in on that type of messaging.
Yeah, and I think for those types of reasons too, it's causing a lot of people to pull back. I work a lot in the financial services space. So in the financial services space, and I know you do as well, there's salespeople, but they're not traditional salespeople. Like, it wouldn't be the first label they would put on themselves, even though that's what they're doing. And I've had so many people reluctant to call. And I think it's because of this combination of, number one, I don't want to bother people. And number two is, I'm not really sure how to make the inroads and to get in there. I really believe, as professional salespeople right now, we're essential. There's never been a more important time for us to be in front of our customers right now. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and what you're advising with any industries that you're working with, and if you're experiencing any reluctance at all.
There certainly is a level of reluctance. And I also think that one of the things we have to recognize is that no matter what your role is, this whole calamity we're all in has affected each one of us.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that it's easy to say, well, how are we going to attract the attention of our client? And how are we going to do this? And how are we going to do that? And at the same time, all of a sudden you're saying, wait, I have kids who are now home who are supposed to be at school, and my spouse and I would both be away at work, and now we're both at home, and the kids are there too, and the dog is, all of a sudden we've got all these other issues going on that I don't want to ignore, because those are important. So it's critical that we have the right mindset. I think that in some cases what happens is people are reluctant to call, either because they don't want to bother somebody, or they just don't know how to start the conversation.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to start the conversation is empathy. So you can contact someone who's been a long-term client and say, hey, how have you been?
Yeah.
So it's not, how are things going, this and that. How have you been? And then just stop talking. And you might hear from them, oh, this has been tough, or I'm working from home, I get this, I get that. That's great. Right now, the 3 biggest things that people are telling us that we can help them with are this problem, this one, or that one. And if none of those are important to you, I certainly don't want to get in the way of your other priorities, but if it is, I want to make sure you know we can help in those areas. Does one of those stand out?
Yeah.
And so now you're starting with that level of empathy and how you can help instead of, let me tell you about the 3 things that we have that are so great. We have this new product and it's now blue. And
Right.
no one cares.
Well, the thing that I love about what you're saying is what I've been telling my clients, and quite frankly, I've kind of been on a little soapbox preaching about it, is when you start with empathy, if you will just be quiet and you will just listen, not only will your customers tell you exactly what their problems are, but they'll tell you in their language. And that language is the language that you need to be using then to reiterate the problems that you're solving. I mean, this is, in essence, this is so simple, right? It's like, Ian, I just have to ask you how things are going. And then I need to be quiet. And then I need to take a lot of notes, because then if I use the language that you gave me, I'll not only make you happy and solve your problems, but I'll attract new business because people exactly like you are articulating the problems in the exact same way.
It's so well said, Meredith. And really what it comes down to is that oftentimes people will say, well, what if I ask them, how have you been? And they say, I've been okay. Now what do I do? And you can say, well, okay, so can you be more specific? And now they'll just keep going. So sometimes you just need to like rev the engine a second time, or pull the rope on the lawnmower a second time to get it to start. And generally, psychologists learned this a long time ago, which is the real answer is never the first answer. It's
Right.
always the secondary or tertiary answer that actually gets to the root of the matter. So if you say, how have you been? Well, this and that. And so personally, is your family doing okay? This and that? Yeah. So what are the top 2 or 3 challenges in this new environment for your business or for your financial situation or whatever it happens to be? Because we're hearing a lot of different things. I'm curious, which of the top things that you're facing right now? So you're talking about them, not about you.
Yeah.
Or you can say, yeah, it's interesting because the 3 biggest things we've been hearing lately are these 3. How common do you think those are? Oh man, that's all we're dealing with. Really? Tell me more about that. And now just let them go, because oftentimes salespeople believe that they make a sale because of what you said. And the reality is you make a sale because the questions you ask and that the client feels like they're fully understood.
No, I think I really want to make sure that all our listeners can capture this, because it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Is the moment that you tell a customer, these are the things that we're hearing from your peers, your colleagues, it just opens them up. It like gives them permission to, because some people don't want to be negative, or some people don't want to come out as, opening up and showing that they're having some challenges right now. But the moment that you say, wow, these are some things that we're hearing in the industry, whether they're positive or challenging, people will then start to open up and they'll feel too. It's such a good transition. Yeah. So it's hard to believe, but we're coming close to the end here. I do want to ask you for your biggest piece of advice. You're going to give our listeners a piece of advice on how to navigate uncertainty. What's your big piece of advice?
Well, am I allowed to give 2?
Yeah.
Can I give 2 pieces of advice, Meredith? All right. So that first one is making sure that people can tap into very clearly the problems that you solve for people today. And it's got to be in their words. And when you hone in on that, it has to be something that would be important, 0 to 10, at a level an 8, 9, or 10. Because if you identify a problem that's a 5, no one's going to take the initiative or spend money to solve it. The second thing is to make sure that we identify kind of 3 levels in our industry that says these are the types of, in essence, partnerships you can have to solve these problems. It's at these 3 levels, and be able to describe those succinctly so that people can quickly understand how you're different than what other people do. Because when your client doesn't know the difference between what you offer and what other people offer, it's not their fault, it's our fault for not making that clear.
I agree with that. I got to ask you one last question on that, because I don't want to leave listeners without this. What are the best ways to figure out how you're different, how you're unique?
So there's a whole process that I take people through. I call it the client vision pyramid, But a lot of it is, what I look at it is the three levels in most industries come down to the first level is kind of an effective level, meaning it's effective. It could be do it yourself, self-directed. You're telling someone else what to do and they go ahead and do it. The next level is kind of more like an operational level that says these are people that have best practices and have a common approach to things. As long as you fit into one of their models, that's great. And the highest level I call the engaged level. And the engaged level is when you're tailoring everything around the goals and the needs of that individual and then bring to bear all these resources to deliver on those results. And so if you think of it as kind of a tactical, operational, or strategic, meaning effective, enhanced, and engaged, that helps. And part of it is asking your recent clients, hey, what compelled you to pick us over somebody else? What really stood out? And people say, you can ask them that? Yeah, they'll be happy to tell you. If you say, we're trying to work on our messaging a little bit, what really stood out for you? If you just stay quiet, they'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing I'm learning is that if as a salesperson, I can learn to stay quiet, I'm going to learn a lot. It's going to help me with my business forward, right? Ian, I could talk to you all day, so I really want you to come back, and I want to have another one of these down the road. But in the meantime, please tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, how they can find out more about same-side selling and your strategic advising, and just how they can engage with you, because you just have some fantastic information as we showcased here today.
Well, Meredith, that's nice of you to say. And as you know, I'm a big fan of you and your work. The best place for people to reach me is either at ianaltman.com. So it's IANALTMAN.com. Same thing on Twitter, or at the Same Side Selling Academy. So it's samesidesellingacademy.com.
Well, I really encourage you to follow Ian. Like I said, this was just the tip of the iceberg of what you can learn. So join us next week for another episode, and we'll help you emerge successful and learn to thrive in an uncertain marketplace. See you next time.